The clash of steel echoes long after the battle ends. Some warriors never truly leave the field. We are embarking on a journey into the shadowy realm where medieval history and myth become one, a place of timeless warriors whose stories defy the grave. By the end, you will possess a tapestry of 25 of the world's most enigmatic legends, each a puzzle that has captivated minds for centuries. We will meet spectral armies racing across stormy skies and kings sleeping beneath ancient hills, waiting for a call that may never come. What is it about these ancient fighters that holds our imagination so completely? Beneath the green slopes of Glastonbury Tor, the earth itself holds its breath. Our journey into timeless myths begins not with a battle cry but with a profound silence. This is the legend of the Sleeping Knights, the first of our 25 enigmas. The story tells of a hidden cavern deep below that ancient hill where a company of warriors rests in an enchanted slumber. They are often named as King Arthur and his most loyal companions, figures of such immense power and virtue that they could not simply die. Instead, they entered a state of suspended animation, waiting for a prophesied day when their homeland, England, would face its darkest peril. Only then would they awaken, rise from the earth, and drive back the invading darkness. This is an archetype as old as the hills themselves, the warrior in stasis. It speaks directly to a universal human longing, the hope that our greatest protectors are never truly gone, merely waiting. The roots of this specific tale are a fascinating tapestry. They weave together threads of ancient Celtic folklore, which spoke of otherworldly kings sleeping within hollow hills, with the later grand tradition of Arthurian romance. When monks at Glastonbury Abbey claimed in the 12th century to have discovered the tombs of Arthur and Queen Guinevere, it cemented the location's sacred link to the myth. The story evolved, transforming from a simple burial site into a living, breathing secret, a chamber of readiness beneath the soil. The Tor itself seems to encourage such belief. For centuries, people have reported strange experiences there, sensations that defy easy explanation. Some speak of a palpable energy, a low hum felt in the bones rather than heard by the ears. Others recount fleeting visions, glimpses of armored figures in the mist, or the distant, mournful sound of a horn echoing from within the hill. These are not just old wives' tales, they are persistent personal testimonies that give the myth a texture, a sense of immediate, eerie possibility. It is as if the landscape remembers the story and occasionally allows it to bleed through into our reality. What does this myth truly protect? It is more than just a nation's borders. The Sleeping Knights of Glastonbury guard the ideal of a return to a golden age, a time of perfect justice and order that was lost. They represent the ultimate reassurance, a cosmic safety net woven from legend. Their endless vigil tells us that some virtues are so potent they can halt time itself, preserving heroism like a fly in amber, ready to be unleashed when the world forgets what righteousness looks like. This is a powerful comfort, the dream that our finest hour might not be behind us but sleeping, waiting for the moment it is most desperately needed. While the Knights of Glastonbury sleep in patient silence, another legion of warriors knows no rest at all. Their battlefield is the storm-racked sky itself, and their charge is an eternal, terrifying procession. This is the Wild Hunt, our second enigmatic myth, a spectral army whose legend haunts the folklore of nearly every corner of Europe. Picture, if you will, a winter's night. The wind howls with an unnatural fury, and the clouds race across a bruised sky. Then you hear it, the distant baying of hounds, not of this earth, a sound that chills the soul. The thunder of hooves follows, not on solid ground, but echoing through the air. And then you see them, a host of ghostly riders and their phantom dogs, streaking across the heavens in a wild, desperate chase. This is the Wild Hunt, a cavalcade of the eternally restless. Its leader changes with the land and the teller of the tale. In the frozen north, it is the one-eyed god Odin riding his eight-legged steed Sleipnir. In the British Isles, it might be the ancient King Hurler, doomed to ride until a hound he carries dismounts, or even the historical figure Sir Francis Drake, transformed into a spectral admiral leading his crew across the Devon sky. The common thread is always a figure of immense power, now a lord of the lost, commanding an army of souls who cannot find peace. This terrifying vision was universally interpreted as a dire omen. To witness the wild hunt was to be marked, a harbinger of cataclysm. It foretold war, plague, or the death of a king, a supernatural warning that the natural order was about to be violently overturned. Some stories say that to look upon the hunt directly could sweep your own soul away, forcing you to join its endless ride. Others warn that leaving a door unlocked might allow the hounds to pour into your home. This myth is the very personification of a specific kind of eternal warfare, the restlessness of those who died by violence. These are not warriors sleeping in hope, but warriors trapped in the moment of their frenzy, forever reenacting their final charge. They are the souls who fell in battle without resolution, without proper rites, or with too much rage still burning in their hearts. The wild hunt gives that abstract sorrow a form we can see and hear, a ghostly army forever bound to the concept of the battlefield, even as their battlefield becomes the sky. It transforms the sound of a real storm into something far more ancient and haunted. The howl of the wind becomes the cry of the hounds, the crack of thunder becomes the snap of a spectral whip. This myth does something profound. It takes the universal human fear of violent death and the unknown fate of the soul, and projects it onto the grand, uncontrollable canvas of the heavens. It tells us that some conflicts are so monumental, so soaked in passion and pain, that they simply cannot end. The energy of that violence lingers, echoing through time, a permanent scar on the world that occasionally becomes visible, racing through the clouds on a dark and stormy night. Where the sleeping nights offer the comfort of eventual return, the wild hunt offers a stark, chilling poetry, a reminder that some warriors are not waiting to save us, but are forever lost in the tempest of their own end. Yet for every army lost to the sky, there is a single weapon whose story is so potent it becomes a living entity. High within the walls of Stirling Castle, encased in glass and silence, rests a length of weathered steel that seems to hum with a suppressed fury. This is the great two-handed sword of William Wallace, our third timeless enigma, a relic whose legend is forged from equal parts history, defiance, and a chilling, whispered curse. The blade itself is a brutal, functional instrument, over 5 feet long from pommel to tip, designed not for elegant duels but for the sweeping, devastating arcs of a battlefield. It is less a sword and more a force of nature given metallic form. Wallace, the Scottish knight who became the soul of resistance against English rule, wielded this very weapon in the late 13th century, most famously at the Battle of Stirling Bridge. In his hands it was a symbol of righteous rebellion, a tool of liberation. But the legends say that when the cause is unjust, the sword's nature changes. It is said to be cursed, bringing grave misfortune, defeat, or even death to any who dare to wield it without a heart as pure and a cause as just as Wallace's own. This is not a myth of a sleeping warrior, but of a weapon that absorbs the spirit of its master and enforces a brutal moral code long after he is gone. The sword's physical journey through history reads like an epic tale of capture and recovery. After Wallace's betrayal and execution in 1305, the sword was taken as a trophy by the English. It passed through various hands for centuries, its whereabouts often unknown, before miraculously reappearing and being returned to Scotland in the 19th century. This long absence only fueled the mystique. Where had it been? What hands had touched it? The analysis of its metal and construction adds another layer of intrigue. Experts confirm it is a genuine medieval weapon. its blade a composite of different steels, its hilt worn smooth by the grip of one defiant man and the centuries of air that followed. But science cannot measure the stories. Visitors and curators alike have reported strange phenomena around its display. Some speak of a sudden, profound drop in temperature when standing before the case. Others mention an inexplicable feeling of being watched or a faint, metallic scent like old blood and rain that seems to have no source. These persistent personal accounts cling to the relic, suggesting its story is not fully contained by glass. The cursed sword of Wallace represents a different kind of timeless warfare, one where the artifact itself becomes the warrior. The man is gone, martyred in the most brutal fashion, but his principle, his righteous anger, is believed to be sealed within the steel. The curse is a narrative safeguard, a way for the legend to protect the purity of the original cause. It declares that this symbol of freedom cannot be corrupted, cannot be turned to petty ends or vain glory. To try is to invite catastrophe. The sword, therefore, is not merely an object on display. It is a dormant judge, a sleeping arbiter of justice that the stories insist is still perilously awake. It asks a silent, heavy question of everyone who views it. Do you have a cause worthy of this blade? Could your heart withstand its weight? In this way, the myth transforms a historical artifact into a perpetual moral challenge, ensuring that the spirit of the warrior it served continues its vigil, not from a hill or the sky, but from a silent chamber, waiting to see if the world will ever again produce a hand fit to hold it. France has its own king sleeping beneath a hill, but he is not a king at all. He is a paladin, one of the legendary 12 peers of Charlemagne, and his name is Ogier the Dane. This is our fourth timeless warrior, a figure whose story beautifully illustrates how myths travel and transform, crossing borders and blending traditions to create new legends of eternal readiness. Ogier, a hero of immense strength and loyalty featured in the epic Chansons de Geste, fought for the great Frankish emperor against Saracens and giants. Yet his most fascinating chapter begins after his mortal adventures conclude. In the later medieval romances, his fate takes a wondrous turn. The enchantress Morgan le Fay, the very same mystical figure from Arthurian lore, intervenes. Recognizing his unparalleled virtue and valor, she does not let him die. Instead, she spirits him away to the mythical Isle of Avalon, the same otherworldly paradise where King Arthur is said to heal from his wounds. There, Ogier the Dane enters an enchanted sleep, preserved in youth and strength, awaiting a celestial summons. The prophecy states that when France faces its most dire existential threat, Ogier will awaken. He will rise from the mists of Avalon, his legendary sword Curtona in hand, to defend the nation he served so faithfully in life. This creates a stunning parallel, a direct cultural adaptation. The core archetype of the sleeping protector, so deeply rooted in British soil with Arthur, is transplanted and regrafted onto the heroic landscape of France. The British king under the hill becomes the Frankish paladin in the magical isle. It shows how neighboring cultures did not merely borrow stories, they actively claimed them, weaving their own national heroes into the universal template of the timeless warrior. This adaptation served a powerful purpose. Just as England needed the promise of Arthur's return to sustain its sense of destiny, France, with its own long history of invasion and conflict, required a similar mythic safeguard. Ogier provided that. He was a perfect vessel, a Christian knight of impeccable loyalty, now guarded by a pre-Christian enchantress, a bridge between the old world and the new, between mortal history and fairy tale eternity. His sleep in Avalon is more than a rest, it is a diplomatic mission between realms of legend. His presence there ties the Carolingian cycle to the Arthurian cycle, suggesting a hidden continuity between Europe's great heroic ages. It implies that the capacity for miraculous return is not limited to one kingdom or one lineage, but is a latent power available to any nation that produces a hero of sufficient caliber. Augier's myth asks us to consider what makes a warrior truly immortal. Is it their deeds alone, or is it the enduring need of the people who tell their stories? The sleeping paladin represents a collective hope meticulously tailored. He is not a vague symbol, but a specific answer to a specific anxiety, a named hero placed in a borrowed magical setting to stand eternal watch. His story assures that France's greatest champion is not gone, but merely on a longer posting, his retirement spent in a land beyond time, always listening for the distant sound of his homeland's most desperate hour. The silence of a sleeping paladin is a world away from the haunted woods of Germania. Here, the past does not rest, it screams. Deep within the dense, ancient expanse of the Teutoburg forest, the air itself feels heavy with a memory of metal and blood. This is the site of one of the most devastating military disasters in Roman history, and our fifth enigmatic myth, the Phantom Legion. In the year 9 AD, 3 elite Roman legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, marched confidently under the command of Publius Quinctilius Varus. They were betrayed by their Germanic guide, Arminius, a chieftain who had secretly united local tribes. In a meticulously planned ambush over several days, the forest itself turned against the Romans. The narrow, muddy paths became death traps. The relentless rain and fog neutralized their famous discipline, and the Germanic warriors, knowing the land intimately, attacked from the shadows. When the slaughter finally ended, some 15,000 Roman soldiers lay dead. The defeat was so complete, so psychologically shattering, that the Emperor Augustus was said to wander his palace, crying out, "Quintili ver, legions red." Quinctilius Varus, give me back my legions. The numbers were never reassigned, the legions wiped from the Roman military roll in disgrace, but history tells us the battle ended. The legends insist it did not. For centuries, locals and travelers have reported terrifying phenomena within those woods. On certain fog-bound nights, especially near the anniversary of the massacre, the forest grows unnaturally quiet. Then the sounds begin, the distant, echoing clash of swords on shield, the agonized cries of men, the thunderous roar of a battle that has no visible source. Some claim to see fleeting glimpses of spectral figures, Roman legionaries in tattered armor locked in combat with ghostly Germanic tribesmen, their struggle repeating in a silent, horrifying pantomime among the trees. This is not a myth of a single timeless warrior, but of an entire army trapped in its moment of cataclysm. The landscape of the Teutoburg forest has become a permanent memorial, not of stone but of sound and sensation. The event was so traumatic, so definitive in halting Roman expansion east of the Rhine, that it seems to have scarred the very fabric of the place. The Phantom Legion myth serves a profound purpose. It externalizes collective trauma. For the Germanic peoples, the battle was a foundational victory, a moment of unification and triumph against a colossal empire. For Rome, it was a humiliating nightmare. The ghost story honors both perspectives. It freezes the pivotal instant of conflict, making it eternal. The warriors are not sleeping, they are perpetually dying, forever achieving and forever suffering their fate. This eternal echo transforms the forest from a simple geographic location into a sacred, haunted space. Every rustle of leaves, every crack of a branch underfoot becomes potentially historic. The myth asks us what happens when a place witnesses too much death too suddenly. Can the energy of such concentrated violence simply dissipate? The stories from the Teutoburg forest suggest it cannot, that it instead seeps into the soil and the mist, replaying on a loop for those sensitive enough or unlucky enough to witness it. It is a natural memorial far more powerful than any carved monument, a living reminder that some victories and some losses are so absolute they can never truly be laid to rest. The Phantom Legion ensures that the warriors of that forgotten autumn are not just names in a history book, but permanent residents of the twilight, their tragedy imprinted on the wind and the wood, an army forever marching to its doom in the heart of the German forest. The haunted quiet of Teutoburg Forest speaks of an army broken by chaos, but from the frozen north comes the story of a warrior who became the chaos. This is the myth of the berserker, our sixth timeless enigma, the warrior in the bear shirt. In the sagas of the Vikings, these were not mere soldiers, they were forces of nature. A berserker, whose name likely means bear shirt or bear coat, was said to prepare for battle through rituals that stripped away his humanity. He would enter a state known as berserkergang, a trance of such pure, unthinking fury that he seemed immune to pain and fire, howling like a beast, biting his shield, and carving through enemy lines with a strength beyond mortal men. This was not simple battle rage, it was a sacred, terrifying possession. The wearing of a bear or wolf pelt was not just camouflage, it was a symbolic act, an attempt to literally cloak oneself in the spirit and power of the animal, to become the bear or the wolf in mind and muscle. Historical accounts, from the wary observations of Christian monks to the proud boasts within the Norse sagas themselves, describe these warriors as the shock troops of their age, feared by enemies and often viewed with a mix of awe and apprehension by their own people. Their fury was a double-edged sword, a weapon that could win a battle but was terrifyingly difficult to control. What could possibly trigger such a profound transformation? Scholars have long debated the source of the berserker's rage. One compelling theory points to ritualistic intoxication. Certain plants and fungi known to the Norse, like henbane or the vividly red and white Amanita muscaria mushroom, contain potent psychoactive compounds. Consumed in precise, ritual doses under the guidance of a shaman or war leader, these substances could induce states of dissociation, heightened strength, and a loss of fear and pain receptors, perfectly mirroring the descriptions of berserkergang. This suggests the berserker's fury was not a random genetic fluke, but a carefully cultivated, chemically assisted transcendence, a brief and brutal communion with the animal world. Yet the myth endures far beyond any historical or pharmacological explanation. The berserker represents the ultimate fantasy and fear of the warrior who shatters his own limits. He is the human weapon pushed past the breaking point of reason, accessing a primal well of power that civilization normally keeps locked away. His timelessness lies in that terrifying threshold. He asks a question that has echoed from ancient battlefields to modern sports arenas. What are we capable of when we completely let go, when we surrender not to an enemy but to something older and wilder within ourselves? The enduring image is not just of a man fighting, but of a man becoming the storm, his humanity momentarily dissolved in a sacred, animalistic rage. This myth cautions that such power always comes at a cost. The berserker in the stories often could not distinguish friend from foe in his frenzy. He was a liability once the battle was won, a raging fire that had to be left to burn itself out. In this way, he becomes a timeless symbol of sacrifice, a warrior who traded his lasting sanity for a fleeting, overwhelming victory, forever walking the razor's edge between human hero and natural disaster. But the berserker's fury is a solitary storm. For a collective, disciplined mystery that spans continents, we must turn to the sea. In the final, desperate days of the Crusader city of Acre, a silence fell over the harbor that has echoed for centuries. This is the seventh of our enigmatic myths, the mystery of the lost Templar fleet. The year was 1291. The Mamluks, a powerful military force, were at the gates, their siege engines pounding the last major stronghold of the Christian kingdom of Jerusalem. Within the city walls, chaos reigned, yet amidst the panic, a curious void appears in the historical record. The Knights Templar, the most formidable and wealthy of the military orders, maintained a significant naval presence at Acre. They had ships, galleys capable of carrying men, supplies, and most intriguingly, their legendary treasury. But as the city fell in a bloody crescendo on May 18th, those ships simply vanished. They were not captured in port, nor were they reported destroyed in battle. They were gone. The Grand Master of the Templars, Guillaume de Beaujeu, died defending the walls, but the Order's fleet, its wealth, and many of its high-ranking officials were nowhere to be found when the dust settled. This factual vacuum became the perfect cradle for legend. Almost immediately, stories began to circulate. The most persistent tale claims that in the final hours, under cover of night or perhaps through a secret tunnel to the harbor, the Templars loaded their most precious possessions onto their galleys and sailed away. What they carried is the core of the mystery. Some say it was the accumulated wealth of 2 centuries, gold and jewels from across Europe and the Holy Land. Others whisper of something far more profound, sacred relics of unimaginable power, perhaps even the lost treasures of the Temple of Jerusalem itself, which the Order was named for and rumored to have discovered centuries earlier. The fleet's destination is the second great question mark. One compelling thread leads north to Scotland. In the years following Acre's fall, the Templars found refuge with Scottish King Robert the Bruce, who was himself excommunicated and at war with England. The sudden appearance of sophisticated military architects and skilled fighters in Scotland, coinciding with the Order's official dissolution decades later in 1314, fuels speculation that the lost fleet found a new home in the remote Highlands and Islands. The other, even more audacious thread stretches across the Atlantic. Centuries before Columbus, could the Templar fleet, with maps possibly gleaned from ancient sources or contacts in the Islamic world, have sailed west? Proponents of this theory point to enigmatic carvings in North America, like the Westford Knight in Massachusetts or the Newport Tower in Rhode Island, suggesting medieval European contact long before the accepted dates. The myth of the lost fleet transforms the Templars from historical knights into timeless warrior monks adrift on a sea of speculation. It suggests they did not merely die out but strategically retreated, carrying a flame of ancient knowledge into hiding. This narrative fulfills a deep human desire for continuity, for the idea that such a powerful and secretive institution could not have been so easily erased by a papal decree or a king's greed. They became ghosts of a different kind, not haunting a forest but sailing the periphery of history, their treasure and truth waiting to be rediscovered. The enduring power of this myth lies in its unanswered questions. A missing fleet is a tangible mystery. It creates a blank space on the map that imagination rushes to fill with gold, with holy grails, with maps to new worlds. It allows the warrior monks of the temple to escape their grim historical fate, not by sleeping or raging, but by sailing into the fog of legend, forever just beyond the horizon of our knowing. The sea holds its secrets close, but the deepest mysteries often walk right into the hall. In the legendary court of King Arthur, during a lavish New Year's feast, the revelry is shattered by an impossible visitor. A figure of colossal size rides through the doors and the entire gathering falls silent. His skin and his rich clothing are a vivid, otherworldly green. His beard is like a bush, his hair hangs like a cloak of moss, and in one hand he holds a great axe, in the other a holly bough. This is the Green Knight, our 8th timeless warrior, and he has not come to fight a battle but to propose a game. His challenge is a chilling riddle wrapped in violence. He will allow any brave knight to strike him once with this axe on one condition. In exactly 1 year and 1 day, the knight must journey to a place known as the Green Chapel and receive an equal blow in return. It is a test of nerve and honor so bizarre it seems like a trap. Sir Gawain, the youngest of Arthur's knights and famed for his courtesy, steps forward. With one clean stroke, he swings the axe and severs the Green Knight's head from his shoulders. The court gasps, expecting the spectacle to be over, but then the impossible happens. The Green Knight's body does not fall. It strides forward, picks up its own head by the hair, and the head speaks. It reminds Gawain of their bargain, naming the time and the distant place for their next meeting, before the knight mounts his horse and rides away, his head held casually in his hand. This is not a ghost or a sleeping king. This is something far more ancient and unsettling, a warrior who embodies the wild, untamed forces of nature itself, completely indifferent to the civilized codes of men. His greenness is the first and greatest clue. In medieval symbolism, green was the color of fairy magic, of the chaotic natural world beyond the castle walls. But scholars see an even older lineage. The Green Knight's resilience, his connection to Holly and the turning of the year, his death and apparent rebirth, all echo the archetype of the vegetative deity found in pagan myths across Europe. These were gods who would die with the harvest and be reborn with the spring, ensuring the cycle of life continued. The Green Knight is a literary fossil of this belief, a nature spirit dressed in the armor of a knight, intruding upon the human world to test its pride. His challenge is a profound critique of the very chivalry Arthur's court holds so dear. Gawain accepts the game out of a sense of duty and a desire to prove his courage, the pillars of knightly virtue. Yet the Green Knight's game operates on a different, more primal logic. It is not about winning a fight, but about keeping one's word in the face of certain, seemingly supernatural death. The entire second half of the poem follows Gawain's long, lonely journey as the appointed day approaches, a journey into the psychological wilderness of his own fear. He eventually finds shelter in a castle where another, more subtle test awaits him, involving the Lord's wife and a promise of exchanged winnings. When Gawain finally meets the Green Knight at the frost-rimed Green Chapel, he flinches at the first swing of the axe, revealing his very human fear. The Green Knight nicks Gawain's neck on the third swing, not to kill him but to draw a single drop of blood, a symbolic punishment for a miner failing in perfect truth during his castle stay. The revelation then comes: the Green Knight is also the lord of that castle, transformed by magic. The entire ordeal was an elaborate test orchestrated by Arthur's half-sister, Morgan Le Fay, to frighten the court. But the meaning transcends the plot. The Green Knight, as a timeless warrior, represents the immutable laws of nature and consequence that exist outside of human society. His axe is the turning of the seasons, inevitable and unforgiving. His survival of decapitation is the promise that life persists even in the dead of winter. He confronts Gawain, and by extension all of us, with a humbling truth. Our civilized codes of honor are fragile constructs when faced with the raw, green reality of the world. True courage is not found in the bravery of a single stroke, but in the grueling journey to keep a promise when no one is watching, and in accepting our own small, human imperfections. The Green Knight rides away, leaving Gawain with a scar and a lesson, a permanent reminder that the wild world always has the final say, and that the most enigmatic warriors are those who serve a law older than any king's. A praying monk makes a poor soldier but a perfect legend. On a bitter January morning in the year 793, death arrived on the wind for the holy island of Lindisfarne. Viking longships, those sleek predators of the sea, cut through the freezing surf and landed on the shores of one of Christendom's most revered sanctuaries. The raid was swift, brutal, and historically seismic, the first major Viking attack on England, a thunderclap that announced centuries of terror to come. The monks were butchered, the altars desecrated, the monastery's priceless treasures looted or destroyed. Yet, from this unambiguous historical horror, a single, haunting image emerged and took root in the Christian imagination: the warrior monk of Lindisfarne. The story, written down much later by pious chroniclers, describes a solitary monk who did not flee or hide. As the Norse warriors poured into the church, axes gleaming, he remained at the altar, deep in prayer, facing the invaders with a calm that looked like fearlessness. The legends diverge on his fate. Some say he was martyred where he knelt, others that the Vikings, stunned by his defiance, spared him. But his historical existence is almost beside the point. He is a necessary myth, a spiritual counterweight to the berserker's fury. This figure represents the ultimate clash of worlds, not between two armies, but between two complete philosophies of strength. On one side, the Viking ethos of physical power, conquest, and glory won through the sword. On the other, the Christian ideal of spiritual power, martyrdom, and victory found through faith. The praying monk embodies a different kind of warfare altogether, the battle for the soul. His weapon was not a blade, but his unwavering piety. His shield was not iron, but his belief. In the face of overwhelming violent force, his passive resistance became the most radical act imaginable. It transformed him from a victim into a warrior of the spirit. This myth evolved over centuries because it answered a desperate need. For the monastic communities repeatedly devastated by Viking raids, the story of the fearless monk provided a template for holy courage. It said that even if your body was broken, your faith could remain unassailable, that there was a form of victory in dignified acceptance. He became the archetype of the spiritual warrior, a figure who fights not with steel but with sanctity, turning the very sight of his people's massacre into a stage for a higher triumph. This enigmatic figure asks us a difficult question. In a world defined by physical conflict, what is the true nature of strength? The myth argues that the greatest warriors might be those who lay down their arms, who meet violence with a stillness that confounds it. The lone monk of Lindisfarne, whether he ever truly existed, stands forever in that moment of collision, a silent, timeless monument to the idea that some battles are fought and won on a plane no axe can ever reach. The silent defiance of a monk is one thing, but an oath sworn by an entire nation is something else entirely. High in the snow-capped Alps, where the air is thin and the winds carve stone, another kind of timeless warrior took root, bound not by magic or myth, but by an unbreakable promise. This is the 10th of our enigmatic myths, the Swiss pikeman's oath of eternal defense. Long before the famed Vatican Swiss Guard with their colorful uniforms, the warriors of the Swiss Confederacy forged a legendary reputation on the battlefields of Europe. They were the masters of the pike, a weapon that turned disciplined men into a single, terrifying entity. Fighting in dense, mobile squares, their forest of spear points could shatter cavalry charges and grind opposing infantry to a halt. Their effectiveness was born from a profound collective agreement, a sacred oath to defend their mountain passes, their freedoms, and each other unto death. This wasn't just a military tactic, it was a cultural covenant, and from it grew stories that suggested the oath itself had a life beyond the grave. The most famous of these tales swirls around the cataclysmic Battle of Marignano in 1515. There, the seemingly invincible Swiss phalanxes met the combined forces of France and the Venetian Republic, backed by modern artillery. The fighting was among the bloodiest of the era. From this historical crucible emerged the folklore of the Swiss giant. This was not necessarily one man, but a symbolic figure, a composite of the mightiest and most stubborn of the Confederate fighters. Stories tell of a lone, immense pikeman standing like a rock in the retreat, holding a narrow pass or a bridge against impossible odds to allow his brothers to escape. He fights with the strength of 10, his pike a whirlwind, until he is finally, inevitably, buried under the weight of his enemies. In death, his legend transforms. He becomes the eternal sentinel, the oath he swore so fervently in life, the promise to defend that very ground, is now enforced by his spirit. This is where history melts into mystery. For centuries, travelers and locals in the remote alpine passes have whispered of strange sightings. During heavy storms or on the anniversaries of great battles, some claim to see spectral formations in the mist. The outlines of a ghostly phalanx standing silent and immovable across a mountain road. Others report hearing the distant, rhythmic thud of marching feet on stone, or the chill, metallic whisper of countless pikes being leveled in unison, a sound with no visible source. These are not the chaotic ghosts of a lost legion, but the orderly, purposeful shades of men who never clocked out from their duty. The myth speaks to a powerful idea that a promise made with absolute conviction can imprint itself on a landscape. The Swiss warrior's defense was not just of soil, but of an idea, a fiercely guarded independence. Their oath was a transaction with the land itself, a vow that in return for their sacrifice, the mountains would remember them. So when the nation feels threatened, the old stories say, the land recalls its debt. The bedrock and the ice conspire to replay the moment of greatest commitment, projecting the image of its most loyal defenders back into the world. It is a folklore of reassurance, born from the very real historical trauma of battles like Marignano, which ended Swiss territorial expansion. The ghostly phalanx is a natural memorial, but also a promise. It says that the will to defend this place is so deeply ingrained it has become a geological feature as permanent as the Alps themselves. The warriors are not sleeping, waiting for a single day of awakening. They are perpetually on duty, their oath having fused with the mountain winds, standing guard in a rotation that lasts forever. Spain's parched earth holds a different kind of warrior, one whose legend is split between a blade from the heavens and a body that refused to fall. Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, known to history as El Cid, is a hero whose factual life was remarkable enough, a nobleman and mercenary who carved out his own kingdom in 11th century Valencia. Yet his true immortality was forged in the centuries after his death, crystallizing into two enduring and bizarre myths that make him our 11th and 12th timeless enigmas. The first centers on his sword, Tizona. This was not merely a well-made weapon, the stories insist it was a literal piece of magic. Legend claims it was forged from the iron of a fallen star, metal that had traveled the cold void of space before crashing to Earth, imbued with celestial power. In the hands of the Cid, Tizona was said to possess a terrifying sentience. It would blaze with an unearthly light in battle, its gleam alone causing enemy horses to rear in panic and cowardly soldiers to drop their weapons and flee. The sword was believed to judge the heart of the man who held it, losing all its weight and becoming as light as a reed for a truly courageous warrior, but turning impossibly heavy like a bar of lead for anyone unworthy or faint of heart. This myth transforms the weapon from a tool into a character, a divine arbitrator of valor that chose its master and actively participated in his destiny. It speaks to a deep desire to see heroic virtue as a tangible, measurable force, something a magical object could recognize and amplify. The second myth is even more startling, moving from the weapon to the warrior himself. El Cid died of natural causes in Valencia in 1099, with his hard-won city surrounded by a vast Almoravid army. Facing certain defeat and despair, his wife, Jimna, and his knights devised a plan of desperate genius. They carefully embalmed the Cid's body, dressed him in full armor, and strapped him upright into the saddle of his beloved warhorse Babieca. With the corpse secured, they placed his famous sword, Tizona, in his stiffened grip. Then they flung open the gates of Valencia. The sight that greeted the besieging army was one of supernatural horror. There, at the head of his charging knights, was El Cid, seemingly alive and leading the attack. The ruse worked perfectly. The Almoravid forces, believing the invincible Campeador had risen from his sict, broke and fled in terror. The Cid's loyal followers, fueled by this miraculous vision, routed the enemy and, according to the legend, carried his body to a victorious safe haven. This story blurs every line between man and myth, between relic and living leader. It presents a corpse not as something to be buried, but as the ultimate psychological weapon, a banner of flesh and bone that could strike more fear than 10,000 living soldiers. The tale fulfills a profound narrative need. It refuses to let a great hero's story end with a quiet death in bed. It insists that his spirit, his very presence, was so potent it could command an army even after his soul had departed. Together, the myths of the star-forged sword and the riding corpse create a complete package of supernatural authority. One gives him a weapon with a will of its own, the other makes his mortal remains an instrument of final victory. They elevate El Cid from a historical figure into a perpetual force, a warrior whose power was so immense it could not be contained by the limits of his lifespan or even the decay of his body. He becomes a paradox, a dead man winning a living battle, his legacy forever charging across that blurred frontier where history's truth ends and a nation's soul takes over. A corpse riding to victory is a hard legend to follow, but an entire elite guard vanishing into thin air is another kind of mystery altogether. In the heart of the Byzantine Empire, the glittering, treacherous city of Constantinople, the emperors themselves placed their lives in the hands of foreigners. This was the Varangian Guard, our 13th timeless enigma, a brotherhood of exile and axe, recruited primarily from Norse Vikings and later from battle-hardened Anglo-Saxons displaced after the Norman conquest. These men were the ultimate outsiders turned ultimate insiders. Sworn to protect the Byzantine emperor with their lives, they were famed for their ferocity, their towering stature, and their unwavering loyalty enforced by a sacred oath. Their weapon of choice was not the slender sword of the East, but the massive Dane axe, a brutal instrument that could cleave a man and his horse in two. They were the emperor's personal insurance policy, a force so feared and respected that their very presence in the throne room was a statement of absolute power. But with the fall of Constantinople in 1453, the Varangians did not just fade from history, they evaporated, leaving behind a vacuum filled with whispers and shadowy tales. The first layer of myth concerns their secretive inner world. As foreigners in a deeply complex and ritualized court, they maintained a fierce cultural insularity. Stories speak of their own hidden rituals, oath-swearing ceremonies conducted in the Old Norse tongue, perhaps invoking the gods of their homeland even as they served a Christian emperor. They were a state within a state, a warrior cult operating behind the marble pillars of the greatest city on earth. This secrecy naturally bred speculation, especially about their final hours. When the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II finally breached the legendary walls after a grueling siege, the empire's end was chaotic and bloody. The last emperor, Constantine XI, died fighting. But what of his guard? Some legends insist their final duty was not to die on the walls, but to save something far more precious. As the Ottoman troops poured into the city, a select cadre of Varangians, so the story goes, was tasked with a desperate evacuation. They supposedly smuggled the most sacred relics and treasures of the empire, perhaps even the fabled imperial crown itself, out of the crumbling capital. Using secret passages known only to the guard, they spirited this unimaginable wealth away, vanishing into the smoke and confusion to hide it, waiting for an imperial restoration that would never come. This tale transforms them from palace guards into eternal custodians, their oath extending beyond the life of their emperor to the very soul of the empire he represented. The second, even more persistent strand of myth asks what happened to the men themselves. Could an entire regiment simply be wiped out? Some stories say no. They suggest that small, disciplined bands of Varangians, cut off and with no home to return to, did what warriors without a cause have always done: they sold their swords. Legends persist of fair-haired, axe-wielding mercenaries appearing in the armies of Balkan lords and princes in the decades after the fall, their fighting style a brutal anachronism. Other tales speak of remote villages in the mountains of Greece or the forests of Wallachia, communities founded by these stranded guardsmen, where Norse features and strange, archaic customs survived for generations. These myths fulfill a deep need for continuity. The idea that the mighty Varangian Guard, the very embodiment of Byzantine resilience, could be completely extinguished is somehow unsatisfying. The stories allow them to escape total annihilation, not through magic, but through sheer toughness and adaptability. They become ghosts of a different sort, not spectral, but flesh and blood, blending into the rugged landscape of a changed world. Their axes now serving new masters, but their old oaths still echoing in some hidden corner of their hearts. The vanished Varangian Guard thus occupies a unique space, a historical warrior elite whose end is so obscure it invites legend to write the final chapter. They are the guardians who never stood down, their final parade march leading not into a barracks but directly into the fog of folklore. The vanished Varangians left a void in history, but some knights haunt a very specific patch of earth with relentless physical fury. In the ruins of Pontefract Castle in Yorkshire, a different kind of guardian walks, one not of sleep or sky, but of palpable, terrifying presence. This is the Black Knight, our 14th enigmatic myth, a poltergeist whose legend is soaked in royal blood and the chaos of civil war. The story begins with a historical crime. In the year 1400, King Richard II, deposed and imprisoned, was brought to Pontefract Castle. Shortly after, he was dead, almost certainly murdered on the orders of his cousin, the new King Henry IV. This act of regicide, a violation of the sacred order, is said to have stained the very stones of Pontefract. From that stain, the stories say, emerged the Black Knight. He is not a named figure, but a faceless, armored wraith, a permanent reminder of the oath broken and the king betrayed. The phenomena reported at the castle over centuries are not subtle glimpses, they are assaults on the senses. Visitors and staff consistently describe sudden, plunging cold spots in otherwise warm rooms, a chill that seems to seep into the bones. Apparitions of a towering, dark figure in full plate armor are seen pacing the broken battlements or standing silently in doorways. But the Black Knight is most famous for his physical interactions. There are countless accounts of people being pushed, shoved, or struck by an invisible force. Some report being gripped by an icy hand, others tell of scratches appearing on their skin. Objects move on their own, and a heavy, oppressive atmosphere of dread often precedes these events. This is not a mournful ghost, it is an aggressive, territorial spirit. So what binds him there? One compelling theory paints him as a spectral guardian, but not of treasure or a sacred relic. He guards the dark secret of the murder itself, the truth of what happened in that castle dungeon. His violent manifestations are a perpetual enforcement of silence, an eternal punishment for the crime, ensuring that the location never knows peace because the act that occurred there violated all peace. Another theory ties him directly to the Wars of the Roses, the brutal dynastic conflict that engulfed England later in that same century. Perhaps the Black Knight is the restless soul of a nobleman or knight who fought and died in that conflict, bound by a violent oath of allegiance to one faction or the other. Unable to fulfill his vow in life or betrayed in death, his spirit remains, acting out its frustration and fury on the living, forever fighting a war that has been over for 500 years. The Black Knight of Pontefract represents a timeless warrior consumed by the unresolved trauma of his purpose. He is duty twisted into curse, loyalty perverted into endless violence. Where other legends speak of waiting or watching, this one speaks only of enforcement. The castle ruins become his eternal garrison, and every visitor a potential intruder upon his unending, angry vigil. He asks a haunting question: what happens when a warrior's oath is so deeply corrupted by treachery that not even death can release him from its chains? A castle's angry ghost is bound to its stones, but what of an entire legion that chose to put down roots, far from the sun-baked hills of Greece, in the misty green valleys of Wales? A story persists that is as unexpected as it is enduring. This is the 15th of our enigmatic myths, the legend of the Lost Legion, a tale that daringly transplants the heroic last stand of the 300 Spartans onto Celtic soil and weaves it into the very fabric of British legend. The historical seed is fascinating. In the 2nd century, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius stationed a unique cavalry unit at the fortress of Ribchester in northern Britain. These were Sarmatian horsemen, fierce warriors from the steppes of what is now southern Russia and Ukraine, renowned for their skill with the lance and their dragon-shaped standards. They were an exotic, formidable force on the edge of the empire. The myth begins when their tour of duty ended, or rather, when it supposedly did not. The story claims that this Sarmatian cohort, often romantically numbered at 300 to echo the Spartans at Thermopylae, never received the order to return to Rome. With the Empire's communications fraying and its attention elsewhere, they were effectively forgotten, left to their own devices in a land that was not their home. But instead of dissolving, the legend says they did something remarkable. They chose to stay. They integrated with the local Celtic tribes, marrying into families and adapting their nomadic cavalry traditions to the rugged Welsh terrain. Over generations, they preserved a distinct warrior ethos, a culture of horsemanship, heavy lance combat, and a deep, almost sacred code of brotherhood and sacrifice. This is where history spirals into grand mythology. In the 19th century, this tantalizing fragment of history collided with the soaring popularity of Arthurian romance. Scholars and poets searching for a historical kernel for the Knights of the Round Table latched onto the Sarmatian legend. Could these stranded cavalrymen, with their dragon banners and their emphasis on elite, mounted warfare, be the seed from which the tales of King Arthur's knights grew? The parallels were irresistibly poetic. The Sarmatians fought under a dragon standard. Arthur's father was named Other Pendragon. The Sarmatians were the Empire's elite heavy cavalry. Arthur's knights were the pinnacle of chivalric combat. The idea proposed that the myth of Arthur was not born in a vacuum, but was a cultural memory, a story told around Celtic hearths about the magnificent, armored horsemen who once lived among them, their deeds growing grander with each retelling until their captain became a king and their fortress became Camelot. This myth of the Lost Legion is ultimately one of cultural endurance, a story of warriors who conquered not by the sword but by assimilation. It speaks to the power of an idea to outlast an empire. These soldiers, the legend says, did not vanish, they changed. Their military structure may have dissolved, but their spirit, their techniques, and their stories were absorbed into the land, becoming part of its genetic and narrative code. They became ghosts of a different kind, not haunting a location, but haunting a culture's imagination. It is a myth that answers a deep human question about origins. Where do our greatest heroes come from? Sometimes the stories suggest they come from far away, strangers who arrive, shed their old allegiance, and pour their strength into a new homeland until they become its most cherished legend. The Lost Legion does not sleep in a hill or ride the sky. It lives on in every tale of a knight on a quest, a silent, ancient cavalry charge echoing through 1,000 years of storytelling. A man who wears a wolf's skin might become a wolf in spirit. Our 16th myth emerges from the brutal frontier of the Livonian Crusade, a century-long holy war fought in the frozen marshes and deep forests of the Baltic region. Here, Christian knights from Germany and Denmark clashed with the fierce pagan tribes of Livonia, modern-day Latvia and Estonia. The chronicles kept by the crusading orders, like the Brothers of the Sword, are filled with tales of battlefield valor and divine favor. But they also contain something far stranger, terrified accounts of pagan warriors who fought not as men but as beasts. They describe foes who rushed into battle wearing nothing but wolf pelts, howling with inhuman fury, seemingly immune to pain and fear. To the armored, disciplined knights, these were not soldiers, they were wolves, shape-shifters who had abandoned their humanity to tap into a primal, demonic power. This myth of the werewolf warrior is a chilling echo of the Norse berserker, but filtered through the lens of religious terror. The pagan Balts, like the Vikings before them, likely used animal pelts as a spiritual tool. Donning the skin of a wolf was not about physical transformation, but a psychological and ritual one. It was an attempt to invoke the wolf's ferocity, its pack mentality, and its ruthless efficiency as a hunter. In the chaos of battle, a warrior wrapped in fur, fighting with reckless abandon, could easily appear to his enemies as a man-beast, a creature from the darkest folklore. The parallels deepen with the possibility of ritual intoxication. The dense northern forests were home to plants like henbane and hallucinogenic mushrooms, substances known to induce trance states, heighten aggression, and numb the sensation of pain. If Baltic shamans or war leaders administered these to chosen warriors before combat, the effect would have been terrifyingly real. A man under such influence might indeed fight with a beast's single-minded fury, feel little from wounds, and produce sounds no ordinary human would make. He would become, for all practical purposes, the monster the chroniclers described, but the myth served a crucial political purpose for the writers of these histories. By labeling their pagan enemies as werewolves, the Christian chroniclers were doing more than recording a strange battle tactic. They were engaging in a powerful act of propaganda. In medieval Christian thought, the werewolf was a creature of the devil, a perversion of God's natural order. To call a man a werewolf was to strip him of his humanity and his right to fair treatment. It demonized the enemy utterly, transforming a human conflict over land and faith into a cosmic battle between the forces of Christ and the legions of hell. This rhetorical move justified the Crusades' extreme violence, framing it not as conquest but as exorcism. The werewolf warrior of Livonia thus exists in a shadowy space between observed reality and manufactured myth. He was likely a real fighter, using ritual, costume, and perhaps chemistry to gain an edge in a desperate war for survival. But in the ink of his enemies, he became a timeless monster, a symbol of pagan savagery that needed to be erased from the earth. This myth asks us to look critically at the stories told by the victors, to hear the howl beneath the hymn. It reminds us that in war, the most enigmatic warrior of all can be the one whose true face is forever hidden beneath the pelt of a story told to make him easier to kill. The howl of a wolf fades, replaced by the chilling hiss of arrows in a French field. The mud of Agincourt is perhaps the most democratic of all haunted grounds. In October 1415, on a field churned to a quagmire by rain, an exhausted and vastly outnumbered English army faced the flower of French chivalry. The battle's outcome hinged not on knights in shining armor, but on the humble yeoman, the commoner armed with a 6-foot longbow of yew. That day, their volleys were a storm of wood and iron, a relentless, whispering death that punched through plate armor and felled horses and nobles alike. It was a victory that shattered the medieval social order, proving that the low-born archer could decide the fate of kings. And there, in that transformative moment, a new kind of ghost story was born. For centuries, locals and travelers on that now quiet farmland have reported phenomena tied not to a single hero, but to a collective spirit. On foggy mornings, especially around the anniversary of the battle, the mist itself seems to take shape. Witnesses speak of seeing rows of faint, grey figures standing in the haze, their forms tall and lean, holding the distinct outline of the great war bow. There is no charge, no battle cry, only a silent, watchful presence. More common are the sounds, the eerie auditory hauntings that require no visual confirmation. People report hearing the sudden, collective twang of hundreds of bowstrings released at once, a spectral snap that seems to come from the air itself. It is followed by the ghostly whisper of countless arrows in flight, a sound like a swift wind passing close to the ear, and then the faint, sickening thud of their impact. These are not the clangs of swords or the shouts of knights, but the industrial, democratic noise of the common man's weapon. This myth is unique because it honors the faceless many. Where other legends center on kings, paladins, or elite guards, the ghostly archers of Agincourt represent the anonymous thousands whose skill and sacrifice changed history. Their eternal vigil binds them not to a person or a treasure, but to the very idea of their improbable triumph. The stories suggest their souls remain because their victory was so personal, so hard-won against such impossible odds. They are the spectral embodiment of earned pride. In a society that rigidly defined a warrior as a noble on horseback, the longbowmen carved out a new identity through sheer, devastating effectiveness, and the land, it seems, has never forgotten their contribution. The haunting is a natural memorial to a seismic shift in warfare and society. The phantom volleys replay the moment the old world died, not with a bang but with a whisper. It transforms the field from a simple piece of geography into a living monument to collective resolve. the ghostly archers ask us a quiet question, one that echoes from that muddy field to our own time. When history is written by the victors, who remembers the names of the individuals who formed the victory? The myth answers that the land itself becomes the ledger, and the mist its pages, forever recording the presence of those common warriors who, for one decisive hour, held the future in their calloused hands and bent bows. The whisper of English arrows fades into the thunder of Asian hooves. From the steppes of Central Asia came a force so terrifying it was seen as a divine punishment, and at its heart was a weapon rumored to be a gift from the heavens. This is the 18th of our enigmatic myths, the Sword of Mars, the legendary blade of Attila the Hun. The stories, recorded by fearful Roman historians, claim this was no ordinary sword. It was discovered by a shepherd who noticed one of his cattle limping from a wound. Tracking the blood, he found the animal had stepped on a piece of ancient, rusted iron protruding from the grass. When he dug it up, he uncovered a magnificent sword. Recognizing its significance, he brought it directly to Attila. The Hun king interpreted this as the ultimate sign. He declared it the sacred sword of Mars, the god of war, sent to legitimize his rule and promise him invincibility in conquest. The myth goes further, suggesting the blade itself was forged from celestial iron, a meteorite that had fallen to Earth, imbuing it with the cold, unstoppable power of the stars. This narrative is a masterclass in political mythology. A simple found weapon is transformed into a divine endorsement. For Attila, ruling a confederation of diverse tribes, such a symbol was invaluable. It elevated him from a powerful chieftain to a divinely appointed scourge, a man whose authority came not just from his own strength, but from the cosmos itself. The Sword of Mars told his followers and his enemies the same story, that his conquests were not mere raids, but the execution of a heavenly mandate. This motif of the celestial weapon is a global archetype. From El Cid's star forged to Zona to King Arthur's sword in the stone, the message is consistent. A weapon from beyond signifies a ruler from beyond the ordinary. It links the warrior king's power to the fundamental forces of the universe, making resistance seem not just futile but blasphemous. The archaeological pursuit of such blades adds a fascinating layer of tangible reality to these legends. Scientists now use metallurgical analysis to identify meteoric iron in ancient artifacts. The high nickel content of space rock leaves a distinct signature in the metal. While no sword conclusively linked to Attila has been found, other ancient blades, like the dagger of Tutankhamun, have been confirmed to be made from meteoric iron. This proves that the concept of celestial weapons was not pure fantasy. Ancient smiths did, on rare and precious occasions, work with this otherworldly material. The existence of such objects lends credence to the stories, suggesting that a real, rare sword of meteoric iron could have inspired the grand legend of the Sword of Mars. The myth ultimately completes the terrifying image of the timeless warrior as an elemental force. Attila, armed with a piece of the sky, becomes more than a man. He is the living instrument of a god's will. His wars are cosmic events, his violence a natural disaster with a human face. This legend asks us to consider the ultimate source of a leader's power. Is it armies and strategy, or is it the story they tell about themselves? The Sword of Mars suggests that the most potent weapon a timeless warrior can wield is not steel, but a symbol so profound it convinces the world his victory was written in the stars long before he was ever born. A sword forged from the stars speaks of a power that descends, but some warriors become one with the very earth they defended. The Great Wall of China snakes across mountains and deserts like a stone dragon, a monument to human ambition and collective sacrifice. Its sheer scale is staggering, but its true weight is measured not in stone but in stories. This brings us to our 19th enigmatic myth, the Silent Sentinels. For over 2 millennia, the wall was built, rebuilt, and maintained by millions of conscripted laborers, soldiers, and prisoners. The conditions were brutal, a relentless grind of hard labor, exposure, and disease. Countless workers died where they toiled, far from home and family. It was from this immense, anonymous suffering that a profound and haunting folklore was born. The stories say that many of these fallen builders and soldiers were not given proper burials. Instead, out of grim necessity or a twisted sense of symbolism, they were interred within the wall itself, their bodies sealed into the ramparts and watchtowers they died constructing. Their physical sacrifice, the legends claim, did not end there. It was believed that their spirits, restless and bound to the site of their death, underwent a transformation. They did not pass on to an afterlife, but instead became eternal, spectral guardians. Their souls were woven into the very fabric of the defense, merging with the stone to stand a watch that would outlast dynasties. This myth answers a deep emotional and practical need. On one level, it is a form of spiritual consolation, a way to give meaning to a meaningless, tragic death. It tells the grieving that their loved one did not simply perish in the mud, but was elevated, his spirit now performing a sacred, perpetual duty. He became a jiangshi, a guardian spirit, forever part of the thing he helped create. On another level, it served as a powerful deterrent and motivator for the living. The idea that the wall was literally haunted by its own builders created a supernatural layer of security. It suggested that the structure was alive with watchful eyes, that any enemy attempting to scale or breach it would have to contend not just with living soldiers, but with the angry, vigilant dead. This belief made the wall more than a physical barrier, it became a spiritual one. The phenomena reported along remote sections of the wall give this myth a chilling texture. For centuries, travelers and soldiers stationed at isolated watchtowers have told similar tales. On still, moonless nights, they hear the faint, unmistakable sounds of marching feet on the parapets long after the last patrol has retired. Some report seeing shadowy figures standing at attention on empty battlements, their forms dissolving when approached. Others speak of hearing the low murmur of distant, incomprehensible conversation, or the ghostly clink of tools on stone, as if the construction itself is forever ongoing in some spectral dimension. These are not the chaotic ghosts of a battlefield, but the disciplined, purposeful shades of men still on duty. The silent sentinels represent the ultimate fusion of warrior and wall. They are the human cost of empire made supernatural. Their myth transforms an engineering marvel into a vast collective tomb and memorial, where every stone potentially holds a soul. It speaks to the idea that the most powerful defenses are those infused with the will of the people, even if that infusion came through unimaginable suffering. The legend asks a haunting question that resonates far beyond ancient China. When a nation builds its greatness on the backs of its people, where do the spirits of those builders go? The folklore of the Great Wall provides a stark, beautiful, and tragic answer. They go into the foundations, they become the silent sentinels, their watch eternal, their sacrifice now literally the bedrock of the civilization they were forced to protect. A perfect knight arrives without a name, his past a mystery sealed by a single, sacred vow. From the misty waters of medieval romance comes our 20th enigmatic warrior, the Knight of the Swan. In tales like that of Lohengrin, the story unfolds with a miraculous arrival. A noblewoman stands falsely accused, her lands under threat, with no champion to defend her honor. Just as all hope seems lost, a small boat glides into view, not powered by oars or wind, but pulled by a single, magnificent swan. Within it stands a knight in resplendent armor, his face hidden by his helm. He steps ashore, announces he has come to be her champion, and defeats her enemies with preternatural skill. His service, however, comes with one non-negotiable condition. She must never, under any circumstance, ask his name, his lineage, or where he came from. To question his origin is to break the enchantment that binds him, forcing his immediate and permanent departure. This is the core of the myth, a contract of absolute faith. The knight offers perfect, selfless service, but it is a gift that exists only in the present moment, utterly detached from history or identity. He is chivalry incarnate, a force of justice that manifests from the unknown, performs its duty, and must remain unknown to retain its power. This archetype represents the ultimate fantasy of the anonymous savior. His mystique is his strength. By having no past, he is unburdened by family rivalries, old sins, or political allegiances. He is pure function, a divine instrument of rightness. The swan, a creature long associated with purity, transformation, and journeys between worlds in folklore, is the perfect symbol for this. It draws him from a realm of magic into the world of men, a beautiful, silent guide that underscores his otherworldly nature. The prohibition against questions is the myth's brilliant narrative engine. It transforms the relationship from a simple rescue into a profound test of trust. The knight does not ask for gratitude, only for faith. He demands that the beneficiary accept the miracle without dissecting it, to value the act of salvation over the identity of the savior. This condition highlights a deep tension within the medieval chivalric ideal. True service was meant to be selfless, yet a knight's identity, his lineage and heraldry, were the very foundation of his social standing and honor. The Knight of the Swan resolves this contradiction by erasing identity altogether, presenting a vision of chivalry so pure it cannot coexist with a name. When the inevitable question is finally asked, as it always is in these stories, the tragedy is not just personal but philosophical. The moment the lady, overcome by love or doubt, whispers, "Who are you?" The magic shatters, the swan returns. The knight explains his origin often as a son of the Grail Knight Parzival from the mystical castle of Montsalvat, and then departs forever, his boat receding into the mist. The loss is absolute. The myth teaches that some forms of grace are conditional on our ability to embrace mystery, to accept that the source of our salvation is less important than the salvation itself. In a world obsessed with lineage and legacy, the Knight of the Swan offers a fleeting, heartbreaking alternative, a vision of the perfect warrior who can only exist as long as we agree not to know him. A vow of silence guards one knight's identity, but an ancient crystal reveals secrets hidden in plain light. The 21st of our timeless warrior myths sails us into the realm of practical magic, the Viking Sunstone. Norse sagas, those epic poems of exploration and battle, make fleeting, mysterious references to a tool called the Solarstein. This was no mere trinket. It was said to be used by Viking navigators, those warrior sailors who crossed the treacherous North Atlantic, to locate the position of the sun on completely overcast days or even after twilight. In a world where losing the sun meant losing all direction on the featureless ocean, this ability was not just convenient, it was the difference between finding new lands and vanishing forever into the grey sea. The Sunstone, therefore, transforms the Viking from a simple raider into a mystical wayfinder, a warrior who commanded not only axes and longships but the very light of the sky. For centuries, scholars dismissed the Sunstone as pure legend, a poetic metaphor for skill or luck. But then, science offered a startlingly plausible explanation. The key candidate is a transparent crystal known as Iceland spar, a form of calcite that is naturally birefringent. This means it splits light into two separate rays. When you hold such a crystal up to the sky and rotate it, something remarkable happens. Even through thick cloud cover, the crystal reveals patterns of polarization, concentric rings of light and dark that align with the position of the sun, which is the primary source of polarized light in our atmosphere. By finding the point where the two images within the crystal merge into one uniform brightness, a skilled user could pinpoint the sun's location with astonishing accuracy, even when it was completely invisible to the naked eye. This wasn't magic in the fairy tale sense, it was a profound understanding of the hidden mechanics of the natural world, a physics trick perceived as a divine gift. The modern discovery of a clear piece of Iceland spar aboard a 16th-century English warship wrecked off the Channel Islands, found near navigation tools, lends powerful credence to this theory. It suggests the knowledge or the tool itself persisted long after the Viking Age. This myth beautifully blurs the line between empirical skill and mythical perception. To the Viking navigator holding the stone, the process would have felt deeply mystical. He wasn't just looking through a rock, he was deciphering a code written in light by the gods themselves. The sunstone granted him a form of second sight, allowing him to peer through the solid veil of cloud as if it were mere mist. It painted him as a master of two worlds, the brutal, physical realm of the warrior and the subtle, hidden realm of natural forces. His strength lay as much in his mind and his perception as in his arm. This enigma reframes our understanding of the timeless warrior. It suggests that the greatest survival tool, the thing that makes a legend endure across impossible journeys, is not always a sword or a spell, but a form of heightened awareness. The Viking with his sunstone becomes a symbol of human ingenuity married to the elements, a partner with the sky rather than its victim. He navigates by reading a map invisible to everyone else, a map drawn in polarized light. The myth endures because it answers a deep wonder: how did they do it? How did those longships find their way? The sunstone provides an answer that is both satisfyingly scientific and wonderfully magical, reminding us that in the hands of a timeless warrior, the two are often the same thing. France's Green Knight does not propose a game, he is trapped in one. While the English Green Knight of Arthurian romance is a cunning tester of virtue, his French counterpart, the Chevalier Vert, is a prisoner of a single, fatal instant. This 20-second enigmatic myth localizes the terror, binding it to specific, lonely places. He is most often reported at remote crossroads or in the shadow of ruined castles, a spectral figure clad in moss-green armor, mounted on a horse that seems made of mist and shadow. Witnesses describe a sudden, profound silence that falls over the landscape, broken only by the ghostly clatter of hooves on stone. Then he appears, charging at full tilt down a vanished lane or across a fallow field, his lance leveled at an opponent only he can see. He jousts with the empty air, a violent pantomime played out in perfect, relentless silence before vanishing as suddenly as he came. This is not a challenge to the living, but a reenactment for an audience of one, his own tormented soul. The Chevalier Vert is a monument to a moment of violent honor that went catastrophically wrong. Local legends attached to his sightings often fill in the tragic backstory. Perhaps he was a knight killed in a duel over a point of honor, his life snatched away just as his lance struck true. Maybe he was the victim of a treacherous ambush at a crossroads, cut down before he could defend himself. The key is the unresolved nature of his death, a violent end that interrupted a sacred, chivalric ritual, the joust. His eternity is spent completing that interrupted action over and over, trying to achieve a resolution that death forever denied him. He is honor itself, fossilized in a gesture. Unlike the English Green Knight, who is an active, speaking force of nature, the French Chevalier Vert is a passive echo, a recording etched into a particular patch of land. His appearance is almost always seen as a dire omen, a warning of impending death or misfortune for the witness, as if the sheer tragedy of his condition is contagious. To see him is to accidentally look behind the curtain of time, to witness a crack in reality where a man's greatest failure and his defining moment have become the same thing, forever on repeat. This myth speaks to the weight of a warrior's code. In life, the joust was the ultimate public test of skill, courage, and divine favor. To die in one was a fitting, even glorious end. But to die because of one, through treachery or accident, was to corrupt the ritual. The Chevalier Vert embodies that corruption. His endless charge is a plea for the fairness the world denied him, a demand for the proper ending his story deserved. He haunts crossroads because they are places of choice and potential betrayal. and he haunts castles because they are the empty shells of the power structures that defined his life. He is a ghost of the system itself, a chilling reminder that the Code's warriors' life can, in a single unfair moment, become the chains that bind them for eternity. His silent joust asks us what we are really watching, a ghost or the permanent scar left by a broken promise of honor, still trying to keep its appointment on a field that time itself has forgotten. Silence can be the sharpest weapon of all. While the Chevalier Vert is trapped in a visible, repeating tragedy, another order of warriors perfected the art of becoming invisible, their legend built on whispers and the sudden, shocking punctuation of a dagger. This brings us to the 23rd of our enigmatic myths, the secret brotherhood of the Hashashin. The name alone conjures images from 1,000 sensational tales, shadowy figures in white robes, drugged into a fanatical frenzy, leaping from paradise gardens to murder at the whim of a mysterious master. This is the myth carefully crafted by their terrified enemies, the Crusaders and sunny rivals. The reality of the Nizari Ismailis, a Shia Muslim sect that flourished in Persia and Syria from the 11th to 13th centuries, is far more fascinating and politically profound. They were not mindless killers, but a highly disciplined, intellectually rigorous brotherhood engaged in a desperate struggle for survival and religious legitimacy against overwhelming empires. Their weapon of choice was not the army which they lacked, but targeted strategic assassination. By eliminating key military leaders, governors, and scholars who opposed them, they aimed to paralyze their enemies and carve out a space for their own state. This was asymmetrical warfare of the most precise and psychological kind. The myth of drug use, from which we get the word assassin, is almost certainly a fabrication. Chroniclers like Marco Polo popularized the tale of the old man of the mountain using hashish to give his followers a glimpse of paradise, thereby motivating them to die for him. Historical analysis suggests this was a potent piece of propaganda. By painting the Nizari as drug-crazed fanatics, their enemies could dismiss their theological arguments and political grievances, dehumanizing them as something less than rational men. The truth was likely more about ideology and indoctrination. Recruits were intensely educated in Ismaili doctrine, bound by absolute loyalty to their imam, and convinced their actions were a sacred duty to protect the faithful. Their obedience was not blind but fiercely devoted. The real genius of the Hashashin myth lies in the cultivation of an aura, a psychological weapon more powerful than any blade. Their leader, known to the Crusaders as the Old Man of the Mountain, understood the power of theater. His fortress, Alamat, was perceived not just as a stronghold, but as an inaccessible eagle's nest, a place of mystery and dread. The assassins themselves were masters of disguise and patience, infiltrating enemy courts for months or even years as servants or scholars, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The killings were almost always public, carried out in broad daylight in mosques or marketplaces, often with the assassin making no attempt to escape. This was the ultimate message. It was not merely murder, it was a demonstration of terrifying reach and inevitability. It said, "We are everywhere, our will cannot be stopped." Not even your most guarded spaces are safe. This cultivated a myth of the warrior as an unseen, inevitable force, a ghost that could materialize at your elbow and then vanish, leaving only the corpse and a kingdom paralyzed by fear. The Hashashin, therefore, represent a unique evolution of the timeless warrior archetype. They were not eternal because of magic or a curse, but because of an idea so potent it transformed men into specters. Their legacy is the shadowy operative, the agent who operates beyond the rules of conventional war, whose power lies in secrecy, patience, and the profound psychological impact of a single, perfectly placed blow. They remind us that sometimes the most enigmatic warrior is the one you never see coming, whose myth is built not on the battlefield, but in the fearful whispers of the court and the cold certainty of a blade appearing from nowhere. A bishop's crozier is meant to guide souls, not shatter shields. Yet in the swirling chaos of the Battle of Hastings, one holy man wielded a very different kind of staff. The Bayeux Tapestry, that epic 70-meter-long embroidered chronicle, shows Bishop Odo of Bayeux, half-brother to William the Conqueror, not praying in the rear but in the thick of the fight. He is not holding a cross but a club, rallying the Norman knights at a critical moment. This image captures the central paradox of our 24th enigmatic myth, the warrior bishop. Here were men ordained by God, sworn to peace and spiritual warfare, who took up physical arms with a zeal that demanded explanation and thus spawned legend. The church's official stance was clear: clerics were forbidden to shed blood, but the needs of kingdom and faith, especially during the Crusades, created a glaring contradiction. How could a man of God lead soldiers into battle without damning his own soul? The answer was found in myth, in stories that transformed their violence into a sacred duty and their weapons into instruments of divine will. The legends took two powerful forms. First, there was the idea of the non-lethal weapon. Bishop Odo's club is the perfect example. The story woven around the tapestry's image claimed he fought not with a sword, but with a mace or a baton, a weapon that could stun and incapacitate without drawing blood, thus technically avoiding the sin of shedding blood. This was a legalistic loophole made legend, a narrative workaround that allowed a bishop to be depicted as a warrior while preserving a shred of theological correctness. It was a myth that sanitized his presence on the field. The second, more potent legend was that of the miraculously effective arm. This is where the warrior bishop myth achieves its full transcendent power. Consider the soaring figure of Santiago Matamoros, St. James the Moor Slayer. The story, born in the heat of the Spanish Reconquista, tells of a pivotal battle where the outnumbered Christian forces faced certain defeat. Suddenly, a heavenly knight on a white charger appeared, wielding a flaming sword and cutting through the Moorish ranks. This was St. James, the apostle himself, descending from heaven to fight for the Christian cause. His intervention was not just spiritual, it was devastatingly physical. After such a victory, any earthly commander who fought in his name could claim a reflected sanctity. The myth effectively baptized the entire war, turning a political and territorial struggle into a holy crusade, with the apostle as its celestial general. These stories served a crucial purpose. They resolved the cognitive dissonance of the holy warrior. By blessing the bishop's club or having an apostle lead the charge, the mythmakers created a hybrid ideal, the spiritual champion. This figure could channel divine wrath with a clean conscience, his violence rendered pure because it was in service to a holy objective. The warrior bishop became a living symbol that God was not just on their side, but in their vanguard, his will executed through the bishop's arm or the saint's spectral sword. This mythologizing had a darkly practical effect. It sanctified warfare, making it not a necessary evil, but a virtuous act of faith. It recruited the immense moral authority of the church directly onto the battlefield, motivating soldiers with the promise that killing for the cross was not murder but piety. The warrior bishop, whether a real man like Odo or a celestial vision like Santiago, was the ultimate standard-bearer for this idea. He stood at the bloody intersection of the earthly and the divine, his very existence a legend that declared some wars were not fought by men alone, but were extensions of a celestial battle, and that in such a fight, even a bishop's club could become a relic. The final warrior is not found in a tomb or a tapestry, but within us. These 24 enigmatic myths are more than just old stories. They are the blueprints for our modern dreams of heroism. The sleeping king under the hill awakens in the noble Aragorn, the hidden heir returning to save his kingdom in the Lord of the Rings. The cursed sword, heavy in the hands of the unworthy, finds a new sheath in the mythic blades of countless video games, from the legend of Zelda to Dark Souls, where weapons carry histories and demand virtue. The ghostly battalion, forever refighting its last battle, marches straight into our cinemas as the army of the dead, answering a king's call in the very same epic. This is not coincidence, it is inheritance. We are still building our modern legends with the same ancient stones because the questions these myths answer are timeless. They speak to our longing for a second chance, for the great hero who is not gone, but merely waiting for the moment we need them most. They explore the terrifying price of power, the idea that a weapon or a vow can outlive its wielder and demand a terrible toll. They give form to our collective trauma, allowing the echoes of history's greatest battles to haunt not just forests but our imaginations. The medieval warrior, shrouded in the mist between fact and folklore, remains the perfect vessel for these themes. That era represents a perceived age of clearer contrasts, of black and white armor, of sacred oaths and tangible honor. By placing our mysteries there, we grant them a weight and a gravity that feels foundational. The knight, the archer, the berserker, they become archetypes, pure forms of courage, sacrifice, and fury that we can endlessly reinterpret. Why does this particular ghost still walk? Because the enigmatic warrior represents the ultimate human conflict, the struggle against mortality itself. Whether through a magical sleep, a cursed artifact, or an eternal haunting, these myths are all attempts to cheat the finality of the grave, to insist that a person's spirit, their duty, or their sin can be so powerful it simply refuses to end. They live on in our stories because we still fear oblivion, and we still hope that our deeds might echo beyond our brief lives. They let us play with the supernatural while asking deeply human questions about honor, loyalty, and the cost of violence. Every time we watch a hero draw a sword from a stone, or lead a legion of spectral allies, or struggle with a weapon that has a will of its own, we are not just being entertained. We are participating in a conversation that is centuries old, whispering the same hopes and fears into a new kind of campfire light. The screen glows, the pages turn, and the timeless warriors ride on, their mysteries intact, their vigils eternal, because we have never stopped needing them to stand watch in the borderlands of our imagination. From the silent sentinels in the wall to the whispers of the Hashashin, this journey across 25 myths reveals a map of our deepest fears and highest hopes. We have seen warriors bound to their swords by starlight and curse, their weapons becoming extensions of their souls, judges of virtue long after the arm that swung them has turned to dust. We have witnessed oaths so potent they defy the grave, whether it is a Swiss pikeman's promise etched into alpine stone or a Varangian's loyalty leading him into the fog of legend. Landscapes themselves become libraries of memory, from the Teutoburg forest's phantom clatter to the misty fields of Agincourt, where the land itself replays the moment history turned. And through it all pulses that eternal, human hope for a protector in the shadows, a sleeping king, a celestial knight, a guardian spirit woven into the very ramparts, ready to rise when the night is darkest. These stories are not just relics, they are conversations with eternity, asking what part of us deserves to last forever. Is it our courage, our sin, our promise, or our love for home? The enigmatic warrior is the answer, frozen in a moment of ultimate choice, forever reflecting our own struggles back at us. Which of these timeless warriors captured your imagination? Do you know of another enigmatic myth from your part of the world? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to join us on our next adventure into history's greatest mysteries.